Welcome to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Bankard, and I'm here with two Newport Beachcombers. First, vacation's all he ever wanted. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
I'm great. I just drove over my fresh new Kia. Had an enjoyable time with that, straight from Fashion Island Fashion Week. And yeah, feeling really good, Jen. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling the ocean breeze blowing through my hair.
Get away.
Yes. And he asked Marianne Jean-Baptiste a probing question. It's Antonio Elefano. How's it going, Antonio?
I just wanted to okay. I'm just going to do. I'm doing great.
It's awesome. That was great. Those were all references, dear listeners, to the Newport Beach Film Festival, which the three of us had the pleasure to attend just this past weekend. So we saw 3 films there in total. So first we saw Steve McQueen's Blitz, which comes out on Apple TV Plus on November 22nd. We'll have a few weeks in theaters before that. Mike Leigh's Hard Truths, which is in theaters December 6th. And Malcolm Washington's adaptation of August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, which actually drops on Netflix the same day that Blitz drops on Apple TV Plus. So it's the the streaming wars in full
rock and roller streaming wars.
Yes,
I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, on full display. And as kind of like a little bonus, Antonio and PT, not myself, unfortunately, but Antonio and PT got to see Conclave. USC had a special screening on campus that unfortunately I couldn't go to, but they since we are going to do this whole episode spoiler free, we're gonna include that and throw that in there as a little bonus as well. So yeah, we really wanted to just kind of share our experience going to the film festival and share spoiler free reactions to all 4 of these films that we have now gotten to see before they come out in wide release. So yeah, usually we do part spoiler free, part spoiler full. This entire episode is going to be spoiler free. So if you have not seen any of these movies, and that's very likely, you're totally safe. But before we get into that, PT, if listeners don't think we need a beach vacation after listening to this episode, what can they do?
When you're done pretending your metal detector is a boom mic, you can sign up to follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Any place where you get podcasts, you should be able to find us. You can also follow us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review, and also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTR Pod, and you can also search for the hashtag LTR Pod to see what each of us has been watching individually. Jen?
Thanks, BT. So I just want to open with our experience. For all 3 of us, this was the very first time we had been to the Newport Beach Film Festival. It had been on my list of things to try to do for a few years now, but just never made the timing. This is, in case you don't know, for academics, this is a very busy time of year, the height of the fall semester. So it's always been kind of tricky for us to make time. What was your overall impression? What did you think?
What a great time. I thought it was a fun, relaxed sort of vibe. I found it interesting going to each of the individual theaters that we went to. They had a very distinct character, which was fun. And the crowd seemed like I don't know. It seemed like mostly locals, which was kind of nice, supporting the industry and film. So I had a good time. How about you all?
Yeah, I agree. It didn't feel so much like a central event that we went to as opposed to these individual events, but I think that's because it was across 3 different theaters that, as Antonio said, had very different vibes in each of them, but they were in the greater Newport Beach area, the surrounding towns. And it was, a fun sort of mix of people who seemed like they just kind of grabbed a ticket to a movie, or, then those of us who got a couple of them, but weren't deep in running around. And then the people who looked very serious, who had the VIP sort of lanyard passes that seemed like, oh, they're probably seeing 3 or 4 movies a day for the entire whatever it was, 5 or 6 days that it's happening. Yeah. And then separate from all of that are the sort of parties or the galas that we didn't go to, which seemed like real fancy, but also very like get dressed up and go. And my guess is there might be a divide between the sort of social scene component and the like cineasts trying to grab these early crumbs of movies that are presumed to be in competition. So Jen, what did you think?
Yeah, I would say this was a really interesting experience because for context, we're just coming off the sort of like big film festival, the sort of most popular film festival run, right? It starts back in May with Cannes. I mean, you could say it starts even earlier in the year with Sundance, but really like the fall film festival season starts with like Venice, Telluride, and then it just ended last week with New York Film Festival, right? So that's kind of the like all the Oscar pundits, all the press, that's like all the big press push for these movies happens at those bigger festivals. And now we're entering the phase of the sort of smaller, more regional film festivals get to screen these movies again, right? And so what was interesting to me is that it really did feel like the lower key in that way, like in the sense that like the screenings themselves just seemed like enthusiastic people who wanted to see these movies, as opposed to like a big dog and pony show in terms of like the press for the movies themselves, right? Like out of the 3 movies we saw, and they're pretty big releases, right? These are big movies that are coming out soon. Only one of them had an actual Q&A attached to it, and that was a surprise to us. So when we bought the tickets, none of the screenings had said that there would be any kind of Q&A or anyone associated with the film present. But then when we saw Hard Truths, when we sat down, the person from the film festival told us to stick around because Marianne Jean-Baptiste was going to do a Q&A afterwards. And of course we were like ridiculously excited because we weren't expecting that.
Impossible to put into words the excitement level on Antonio's face. He glowed. He shook. Like there was like a tremor of like him sitting upright. And he looked at Jen and I as if we had lied to him. That like it was a trick. And we had trapped him into a situation. It was almost like a Troy and Community of like, I never want to meet LeVar Burton. I just want a picture. Like that was sort of the vibe of the immediate reaction. But then big smiles. We were all very happy.
See, I was going to go with Parks and Rec. He's the Chris Pratt meme of his character from Parks and Rec, where he's like with his mouth open, looking really excited. Like that's sort of what it felt like to me. Antonio, have we mischaracterized your reaction to this news?
You have not. I was so excited. I was so thrilled, and I was especially thrilled because the movie was good. Right? It, like it's always nice to see like a celebrity or an actor that you really admire, but to be able to talk to them right after you've seen like I consider probably the best work that I've seen of hers. Like that's special.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they even had the audience asking questions. Antonio asked a question and then got scolded that it was a question you weren't supposed to ask. Antonio, what did you ask?
She had this amazing moment.
Use that word.
She said naughty. I think she said naughty.
Oh, she did? Okay.
Yeah, she said that was naughty. And I don't want to spoil anything. There was just a moment in the movie that was sort of a climactic moment for the character. Take us through what she was thinking as the character in that moment. But it was basically like interpret the movie, like give us an interpretation of the movie after. We don't like just move things to the audience. I was like, spoon feed me, Marianne Jean-Baptiste. My mouth is open. Give me the baby food.
And look, in your defense, she did.
She still answered the question. She scolded you, and then she proceeded to answer the question. So that was amazing. So totally worth it. Worth whatever scolding you got. It's great.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like so interesting because I had not really heard about the creative process that Mike Leigh uses. Like I think Antonio probably had alluded to it generally, but I didn't really know the actual. Like she went through step by step in terms of like we start with a list of there's no script, and we start with a list of characters of like people that we know either like in our friends and family or people we've seen out in the world that we kind of that stick in our minds. And that's like there's this like extensive process in which they whittle down and develop the like entire cradle to grave backstory for every character that's in the movie. It sounded incredible and very unusual in a way, and so that alone actually made it really worthwhile. I was like, wow, I'm so glad we came to this, because otherwise I wouldn't have heard that straight from Marianne Jean-Baptiste herself, right? But yeah, so that was really special. And she was so gracious, and I was kind of thinking like, they get her, and it looks like they will, because I saw she flew from Newport Beach probably to Boulder, because she's appearing at another screening at whatever, which I can't remember where it is now though, at another film. Like I just saw a thing that she was going to be at another film festival like tomorrow. So like, so she's making the rounds. And so I was like, that's great, because I think the way she talks about the creative process is so engaging, so charming, and that could be really powerful on the campaign trail. And I think the three of us after seeing this movie, we all were pretty high on it, I would say, but we were all kind of like, she needs to get nominated for Best Actress. Like this needs to happen. And I've heard other critics echo that too, but they say it with much more sort of bittersweet cynicism, I would say, because they're just like, she's not going to, it's unlikely she would make it in just by the nature of how crowded that field is this year. Cause like, she's amazing and people love her, but she's not Angelina Jolie playing an real life opera singer. You know what I mean? Like it's hard from an Academy perspective. It's going to be a tough uphill battle.
Yeah. And I also think that separate from sort of the maybe stardom component is that her character is not warm or particularly likable, which I think is not anything close to a spoiler. Like that's, I have seen now after seeing the movie, I then saw the trailer in the theater after the weekend, and was like, oh yeah, like they're not hiding that like she's just really mean to everyone and very sort of focused on herself, and a clearly frustrating person to be around. And that was sort of what I had heard in the sort of this movie, it's going to come out, and people were like, we don't know if it actually, is going to be that big of a deal, because the most sort of prominent person, most prominent performer who might be in the running for a nomination plays this unlikable character. People won't warm up to that performance. But you know what will help them warm up to it? If Marianne Jean-Baptiste shows up in your theater after every screening to be like, hello, like, here was my process. I'm actually super chill and nice and like actually super creative. And I had a big part in not only acting it, but also developing the whole character. Like that, the more that she can get out there in context where there's potential Academy voters in the room, I think that can only help. Plus, as Antonio always said, and maybe other people will disagree out there, but I think all of us who were there were just like, well, this was the best movie that we saw of the run, and this was an incredible. I think this was also the best performance of all the performances that we saw. So if it resonates with lots of people the way it resonated with us, then there's the possibility that, actual momentum could start churning for her nomination.
Yeah, and I'd say the magic of this movie is that she is such a difficult and just mean-spirited person, right? And yet the film, by the end of it, has you completely empathizing and sympathizing with her in a way that seems almost impossible at the beginning, right? And so I think, yeah. And actually what's interesting is that a lot of critics were commenting that they assumed the movie was not good because it had gotten rejected by so many of the bigger film festivals. And I actually can't remember where it ended up premiering. I think maybe Toronto, but like, that it didn't make its rounds through all the big film festivals, and only premiered at one of them, I think. And that they misinterpreted it because they're like, oh, it's actually because her character's not likable, and the movie is pretty heavy in terms of like the pain that she's going through, and kind of her character arc is like, dark. So I think like they were kind of reframing it as like, oh, it's not because the movie's bad, the movie's great. It's because it's like not a particularly warm and fuzzy movie. It's not uplifting, right? In a way that some of the other movies are.
There was also a like concurrent announcement along with it not being like put into Cannes or put into Telluride, or I think it also tried at Venice, and it got passed there. It did premiere at Toronto. It was like a special presentation at Toronto. And then, but also was at New York, and of course the prestigious Newport Beach Film Festival. But concurrent with that was this sort of basically Mike Leigh can't get money to make another movie, and that Netflix turned down Hard Truths, and it turned down the possibility of funding him, and that this basically what some interviews with him where he was saying, well, this process that I do is not very appealing to sort of the new money people, the sort of switch to tech companies being the studios as opposed to the traditional movie studios, that especially he seems to think the people at the tech companies are just like, so you want us to give you money when you have no story and you have no screenplay, you just have some actors and you want like 7 or 8 months to figure out the story, then you're going to film it for not a lot of money, but you want us to pay you for all that. No, we're not doing that. Like, it's a very deliverable based mindset of, you need to show me what the plan is, and there's no plan. That's the plan. So he was sort of lamenting that, and I feel like it was just a lot of headlines about like, the Mike Leigh stuff isn't working anymore and the new movie's not good. But yeah, I'm hoping that changes, because this was great. And I kind of feel like I haven't seen a lot of commentary from people who have seen it who disagree, who are like, I don't like it. Like, or it wasn't, maybe they were like, it's harsh and I don't know how much I was into it, but it feels very positive. Like the negative chatter is more about the optics of where it premiered and where it's funding and what product, it's at Bleecker Street now. They're not very good at handling movies. Their Oscar chances aren't very good, blah, 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 which is like, okay, but like, that doesn't mean the movie's not great, because it is.
I think it's Mike Leigh's best since Secrets and Lies, which also starred Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and she was nominated along with Brenda Blethyn. She was nominated in supporting actress there. So it's obviously many, many years since then. And I've been a fan of his ever since that movie, because I that movie has such a special place in my heart. So I had high expectations for it, and I was worried that it wouldn't live up to it, but it definitely did. And I know that PT also watched Secrets and Lies right before, and right?
I did, and it was great. It's Mike Leigh is a gap in my film knowledge, so I can also say it's my favorite Mike Leigh movie since Secrets and Lies, but that just means that I've only seen Secrets and Lies and Mr. Turner and Hard Truths, and I liked Hard Truths better than Mr. Turner. But no disrespect to Mr. Turner. But yes, that movie was also incredible. Jen, if you have not seen it,
I have not.
You should check it out.
So you're doing better than I am, because this was my first and only currently Mike Leigh movie. I'm sad to say.
Well, I mean, the bar is set high, because this is good.
Like, wow, Antonio likes Secret and Lies better than this. Like this.
Yeah, I mean my immediate instinct might be to say I like Hard Truths more, but I also watched them sort of back to back, and this is the like new movie smell of like, we saw it at a festival, we saw the actress afterwards. Like that experience was so nice and positive that maybe that's tweaking it. And if I had all the years that Antonio had sitting with Secrets and Lies, I would still hold on to that a little bit more. I will just note there was an update in as of recording 2 days ago on Awards Watch, which is not the definitive sort of predictions, but
they're pretty good,
a site that has predictions. And Marianne Jean-Baptiste is not in the top 5, but is number 7 on the list, which is, I think, up from where she was before, behind Saoirse Ronan for The Outrun and Demi Moore for The Substance, both of which feel like I would question if the three of them are really vying for the last spot, if, it isn't that Marianne Jean-Baptiste could actually get in ahead of those two. All due respect to both performers in movies that I have not seen.
Well, The Substance just has the genre bias going against it. Like, I think a lot of people are very optimistic. Like, maybe the Academy's cool enough now that a crazy body horror movie can make it in. But then I do feel like there's a little bit of hope dicting happening there with that. I think it's safer to be conservative on that ruling. Like, think genre is the last, just see how Barbie did last year, right? Everyone was like, Barbie's gonna win everything, and it walks away with the original song.
The combined ratings on Gold Derby, again, odd makers, who knows, has her 6th over Demi Moore and Amy Adams. So it's happening. Like a green arrow pointing up next to her on that. So, you
Right.
know,
Saoirse Ronan going down.
well, look, that's
Which
you know,
maybe
maybe a pivot moment. Although that's for
right.
the outrun. That's not for
That's
Blitz.
for the outrun, not for Blitz. Yeah, which Blitz would be supporting. But is it safe to say? Because I do want to share kind of our rankings of the three movies, and then hopefully that will get us into talking about the other two. The fun thing about going to this festival, as with going to a lot of festivals, is we actually got to vote for the audience award, which hasn't been announced yet. Like they haven't finished the festival, so it's at some point later we'll update everybody about who won and did our votes count. But they, hand everybody a little quarter sheet of paper that you tear off one of the corners to indicate if you thought the movie was poor, fair, good, or excellent, right? And I assume we all put excellent for Hard Truths.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I mean, and Jasmine was our fourth, and she also selected it.
So yeah, everyone, I assume that this is their top choice out of the three films. I guess for you two, mixing Conclave in there, is Hard Truths still at the top of the
for
list?
me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close. It's a big gap for me between those two, and then the next two. I really like Conclave a lot too, but I probably would put Hard Truths a little bit above it.
All right,
I agree with that. So I will say I had the Piano Lesson third and Blitz fourth, and I believe Antonio felt the opposite, but we both agree they were a clear, tier below at least the other two movies for us.
Okay. Nice.
Hard Truths and Conclave were both 4-star movies for me, and Blitz and Piano Lesson were both 3 stars, and I have Blitz like slightly ahead of Piano Lesson, but it's very close. How about you, Jen, for Blitz and Piano Lesson?
I would go Blitz and then Piano Lesson. I mean, both I thought were good. Blitz, I think, appeals to my quirky sensibilities as a moviegoer. Like, you know what I mean? Like Blitz just is like catnip for me in terms of the type of movie it is. But I think out of all of us who saw it, I was the highest on it. So maybe because everyone was kind of meh to like, I didn't like it. Like Jasmine didn't like it at all. So
Janine was able to join us for this one, Antonio. What were her thoughts on it?
Janine liked it. I think she liked it well enough. I think she probably gave it a good, just like I did. But I was like, I was like, this is definitely good, and I think she was maybe between a good and an excellent. So yeah, she liked it fine.
Yeah, I would say that like a lot of critics had said that it was good, but not Steve McQueen good. Yeah. And so like the fact that his track record is so strong in terms of him making sort of more, artistically unique, like move that this felt kind of in comparison more stock. My interpretation and the reason that I'm higher on the movie than I think a lot of other people is because I think this is going to sound silly, but this is me about to make but that's the point. That's part of the point of the movie thing. That's why I'm making excuses for its basicness. But to me, it felt like the most interesting parts of it were like, let's tell this old-timey, rose-colored old Hollywood war story, but through the eyes of those who have not been represented by past versions of it. And so I think actually I would probably say that the use of kind of the like classic, or because I think Richard Lawson called it, like he really liked it, but he was like, it's a little creaky, it's a little old fashioned in places. And I think that's purposeful. I think Steve McQueen is actively trying to do a pastiche of those kind of old wartime movie tropes and kind of old British history. Like there's almost like a crash course in sort of British cinema in this, like squeezed into this movie in some ways. But then we're getting that same experience, but through perspectives that have not previously been included. So like, and I really like the thread of like, what does it mean to be what does it mean to be English? Right. And like, what is a globalized definition of Englishness and in terms of race and ethnicity and how people are treated based on that, especially during that time period. So I don't know. I thought I had a lot to say. I don't know. I really liked it. I can see the criticism of it. It's not a home run for me by any stretch, but I thought it was doing something like something that held my attention for sure.
I agree that element content of it was novel and interesting. Ultimately, the movie, again, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but it's like there are like parts of the movie, like two sort of storylines that are going on. And for me, one of those was really exciting and interesting, and one of them was kind of boring. And so the movie felt sort of like imbalanced to me. And the pacing was accordingly sort of like suffered whenever we were in the plot line that I didn't find quite as interesting. PT, what were your thoughts?
I agreed with that, and yeah, to me it was less that it was sort of stodgy and old fashioned to a degree, because there was, you could see like how he was playing with some of those things, but yeah, the sort of it felt like an accumulation of events instead of a story that was like, I'm gripped with what's happening. And, maybe that's partly because it's tapped into so much kind of existing history components and sort of just like, and this is the time when this sort of thing will happen that you've heard about the Blitz. So it's like maybe I'm in a bad space of sort of knowing enough that stuff wasn't surprising, but not knowing enough that it was like rewarding to see it recontextualized. So, that it may be a me problem. I will say that the sort of reviews or the commentary that I looked at after seeing it, online back home, was that was the most intriguing to me, was the discussion sort of in line with what you were saying, Jen, about how, this is intentionally tapping into these old time war movie things. And it's because the sort of spirit of the Blitz and like this sort of like, and we, stiff upper lip and we stayed strong, keep calm, carry on, is so ingrained in the culture of England, but also is so weaponized by the keep Britain British, like anti, isolationist, like Brexit types, that this is a sort of like, like, oh good, like here, you love the Blitz, you love hearing about it. Well, here's some stories that maybe won't make you feel awesome about like what, like some of the details and some of the aspects of it that maybe like that type of thinking was actually damaging and painful and bad, mixed in with some of the rousing, like we all came together and we all endured and survived. I wish I felt that during the movie instead of thinking about it afterwards. Like that felt like a yes, as an intellectual exercise, I enjoy thinking about that, but I didn't really feel that in the movie. But I'm also a white American man, so maybe I'm not the person for whom it was made, and I'm not the person, to find that the most resonant.
I also really liked Saoirse Ronan in this. I think I won't be mad if she gets a supporting actress nomination. She has a song in this. She's a beautiful singing voice. I didn't really know that. Has she had singing in other movies?
Let me ask this question, Jen. How would you feel if she wins for this movie? If this is the Saoirse Ronan career Oscar?
Oh, like we're if I'm traveling into the future and we're doing our Oscar Fairy flashback.
I'm saying what if we go forward? Yeah, we're doing an Oscar Fairy flash forward. Would you be okay if like,
she won for this?
Because I don't think anyone would argue here that this is like her best performance in her career. No. But like, would it be sort of like, would this be like A Scent of a Woman if she wins for this, instead of like, so we didn't give it to her for Little Women or Atonement, but we gave it to her for friggin' Blitz? Like, yes, are we sure?
But I want her to have an Oscar. So if it's this or nothing, I would choose this.
I choose Blitz. Okay.
But you're right. Like if I would be willing to hold out because I'm confident enough that she can get another nomination and a win for something that maybe feels a little closer to Lady Bird or Little Women in terms of dessert. I think for this year's Oscar race, I would be happy if she got nominated. I wouldn't necessarily be pushing for her to win. Probably. Yeah. Just another notch in the, like, she's racking up these nominations. We really got to give her an Oscar soon, kind of thing.
Yeah. Little Glenn Close or little Amy Adams, who's little.
Well, no,
Glenn
because
Close.
she never win. They never win. We don't want that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that's the like accumulating all these nominations and then not winning.
Yeah,
she hasn't won. We don't know. Is she going to get there?
I mean, she's also absurdly young for someone who has the number of nominations she has. Yeah, yes. So it's fine.
It's disconcerting.
All right, what about piano lesson? Because I think PT at least was higher on that than I was.
Yeah, I'll speak to that as I think the person amongst the three of us who liked it the best. It's definitely in line with the previous Washington family produced adaptations of August Wilson plays. Is it called the Pittsburgh Cycle? Is that the term for it? Okay. So this is the third one. There was Fences, which starred Denzel. I forget who directed.
It was directed by him. Also,
he directed as well. Okay, and then there was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which was the first of doing these movies with Netflix. I think he made a deal. Denzel Washington has the rights to the film adaptations of the Pittsburgh Cycle, and he has made a deal with Netflix to produce.
There are 10 plays.
There. Yeah, so get ready.
So
there's 7
let's keep
more.
Going.
And so this is the third one, directed by Malcolm Washington, one of Denzel's sons, starring John David Washington, another one of his sons. And this doesn't beat the allegation of this is clearly a play that's been filmed in a there's a few scenes that take place outside of the set, but for the most part it's in this one living room, dining room, kitchen stretch of a house. And that's something that just doesn't bother me. I don't mind seeing a movie that feels like a play for the most part and has that stagey theatrical component. There's a style of acting that seems to be I do not know enough of August Wilson productions, but it seems like from the clips I've seen of stage productions and from these three movies, there's sort of a style of acting that comes out that is very sort of aimed for the balcony, aimed for the last row, that can happen. And I think that those elements stop it from really taking off as a cinematic experience, but I still enjoyed watching this. I liked some of the visual flourishes that were accomplished. If this does get put into theaters, and I don't know the plan if it will be in any sort of a wide release outside of those few theaters that Netflix owns and always sort of throws them in, the Paris in New York, the Egyptian in Los Angeles. But if people have a chance to see it in a big screen, it's there are enough visual elements that felt like they would get lost on a TV viewing that I would say it would be good to go see it in the theater. But and I thought there's a lot of really strong performers that are in this. There were some people that were the way I think the way I described it right afterwards was some people came in turned up to a 10 and they never went down. And some of them tried to find that Spinal Tap 11 to be I'm going to keep going. And then there were other people that were a little more subtle and maybe nuanced. And again, I don't know the degree to which that's the writing and that's the style. But I enjoyed all of that and enjoyed it for what it was. But I feel like that was all these things I'm saying were the big obstacles for the two of you. And I think will be the obstacles for other people, where it's going to be yep. I don't think there's anything as sort of dynamic and attention grabbing as the two leads in Fences or Chadwick Boseman in Ma Rainey. So I do feel like it's gonna sort of end up in this kind of middle zone of people being yeah, sure, that's great. And then everyone's going to sort of move past it.
I have heard a lot of critics say that this is the most cinematic of all of the adaptations so far, which I don't know, because I feel like Ma Rainey had the advantage of it actually went to lots of different locations. We go down the street as she's going to the recording studio. There's the big performance she has in that outdoor theater. You know what I mean? We go to different places, whereas this is so much in this one house with this one piano that it's a little bit harder to do that. It does try to do that with flashbacks, kind of the ancestral generational story, which I do think works well. And I could see them trying. There were definitely moments where I'm oh, cool, that's a cinematic flair. You're trying to get out of the stage play trap, right? I think for me, it just didn't totally make it all the way there in a way that I would endorse it as they did it. They adapted this into a movie as opposed to recording it as a play.
I mean,
Antonio,
I don't mind. I don't mind, stagey things. We reviewed His Three Daughters. That was a pretty stagey film. But for me, I think that there's something in the adaptation in terms of like there were certain sequences of dialogues and certain monologues that felt long, and like you had them on stage, but on the screen, the length of them and the whatever, it just was very pronounced. And then that on top of what PT was talking about, the sort of like there are like the two main characters in particular are they're a lot, um, and they're a lot, and it's just not much in sort of like their volume that it was actually kind of exhausting to both in terms of like following these sort of like long passages where I wasn't quite sure that like it was worth the like the time that we were spending on this, and then also that that there did just seem to be some like a disconnect in like the styles of acting that were happening, that you had ensemble and you had some interesting character work that was happening, but that the cohesion among all of them just didn't work for me in the way that that you would expect something that based on a play to work. So yeah, I was a little disappointed in this one because I liked Offensive and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I don't know that I go so far as to say that I would recommend it, but it was my least favorite of the three.
Yeah, I agree that it could have used an edit. I especially with the monologues, I think. But for me, it had so much potential because it really visually leaned into the sort of ghost story dimension of the play and really brought that out in a way visually that you couldn't do in a live theater, and or not do easily at least. And so I wanted more of that. I was like, oh, if this whole movie from start to finish was like kind of leaning into that aspect of it, I think it'd be great. But I do also appreciate that, like, I think part of the Washington family project is one of canonization of August Wilson. And so, like, I can understand them wanting to sort of preserve the sort of sanctity of the original text. Like, I get it. I think that makes it harder for people at the average moviegoer. So I want to make sure we get some Conclave talk in here. I'm very jealous that you two got to go see it. I'm really itching to see it. I'm gonna get to go see it at some point this weekend, I think. But still, I'm having some serious. Is it FOMO? Because I did miss out, so I don't know if it's fear of missing out. If I did,
it's Popmo.
Yeah, Popamo. Way down in Popamo.
Yeah.
So how was it? It sounds like you liked it.
It was such a good time. I think you even told us you told me ahead of time, or in a previous episode, you'd mentioned some of the feedback from it at the festival, saying that it was, kind of like pulpy and kind of more thrilling than you would expect. And even hearing that, I was like, but come on. It's in the Vatican. It's like dealing with popes. How exciting can this movie be? And then the score, it's I described it on Letterboxd as I think the child of May, December, and Challengers.
Oh yes. What?
It is a lot, and it is constant, and it is just really thrilling and fun, and like the theater that PT and we were all laughing so much in over the course of this movie in a way that I've never laughed at anything involving the Catholic Church before. It was it was so much fun to watch. I kept looking over at PT during certain moments of the movie, like, can you believe this is happening? So yeah, I thought it was so much fun. How about you, PT?
I fully agree. I reacted to the score to this the way, like, I was jealous of the people who reacted to the Challenger score. Like, I thought the Challenger score was too much. This was too much, but in a great way. Like, it was just like, this is a tense thriller and it's happening all the time. Like just constantly like hitting the motifs of the score, which I think is set the right tone for this real kind of secretive, bitchy little like assortment of characters, like plotting against each other and like being suspicious of each other, all as a collection of cardinals who are trying to elect a new pope.
I think Eric Anderson of Awards Watch compared it to RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yep. I could see that. Yeah, no, it's
I like
very.
how you're just like casually confirming that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's yeah, it really kind of just leans into the like cattiness of any, sort of group of people who are all in this weird like, oh, like we're all equals, but also like one of us is going to become the like boss, and like I don't know, like who might it be? Like I kind of want it, I kind of don't. Like, oh, like the people who want it are the bad people, like all that sort of dynamic of trying to select a leader is there, and it's it's not like just a like wacky comedy or anything. I mean, it is also like this mystery that's unraveling and trying to like follow these clues and unpack all these characters, and it does a really good job of sort of planting seeds that like you almost forget about as like, is that was something like, I don't know, whatever. And then suddenly like almost an hour later, like comes back to be like, oh,
Like
yes.
Chekhov's handwritten note.
Yes.
Kind of, yeah, okay.
Chekhov's fingers are on a bunch of little moments in the beginning and end stages of this movie. So yeah, no, it's super fun, great acting, just sort of really like across the board. And we'll get into the Oscars watch of it all, but like Ray Fiennes just anchoring it, holding it down, but like going into like his Grand Budapest register more than you would think. Like every once in a while, suddenly just being like, boop, like this part is here. Like this is also like he gets pushed to a point of like agitation and or whatever, like concern. But yeah, it's yeah, really, really great. We can talk more, I think, in the actual like Oscars watch section of the individual performances. But no, super fun. I will say I was tracking. Antonio and I must have had very different Catholic upbringings if this is the most he's ever laughed at the Catholic Church. Maybe going to a Catholic high school meant I laughed at it more than I should have. But or whatever, I was a bad Catholic boy in school. But I was sort of watching this from the perspective of like knowing that like my parents, who are still quite like religious Catholics, like I was like, they're not going to be able to get into this because it's too sacrilegious about like whatever. But they also are not like in full denial all the time of like the humanity of the people who are in the church. Like they've known too many like family members or like family friends who are priests that they always talk about as having this kind of like whatever attitude about like being competitive and all of that,
yeah,
being
ambition,
like, kind of funny, yeah, like some ambition or at least just like cattiness to others, which is like you'd think they could make that last leap to like it's probably because they were gay and they had no other choice, right? But like they're not quite there. They they did their best. They've gone as far as they can, and like I would say for a while, like I was like I don't know, and then towards the end I was like, you know what? Like they might be able to look past everything and be able to get on board with this. And then the final sequence of twists, I was like, absolutely not. They're going to hate this. They would hate this movie. And luckily they'll never watch it. Because there's just a lot of things that start to pile up that like you kind of forgot about that suddenly come back. And it's like, oh, yep. No, my parents will not enjoy this. But again, they'll never watch it because they will be told it's it's heretical and blaspheming and all that stuff about the church. So they'll be like, well, whatever. They'll go watch Relived in Time instead.
I FaceTimed my parents today, and they said they were going to watch Conclave. And my parents are, to borrow a phrase from Jim Gaffigan, Shiite Catholics. Like they are Catholic. And so at first I was like, maybe that's a bad idea. But then I was like, you know what? PT said his parents weren't going to see it. I kind of want to see what's going to happen here. So I was like, yeah. I told them you're probably going to either really like it or really, really hate it. But let's talk right after. So I think they're going to see it this weekend. My aunts are coming in for vacation, and they're going to visit them, and they're all going to go together. So a gaggle of Filipino Catholics are going to go watch this movie, and we'll see what happens.
That's going to be incredible.
It'll be incredible.
I will note. I don't know. It's actually like it's not. I don't think the Jim Gaffigan Shiite Catholics is the right way of saying it, but they are very like because they are like more social justice Catholics. Like that's sort of the zone they're in, but they are very protective of like outsiders. Like doing things about the church is like not okay. Like it's like we keep it in house. Like they will not watch the Da Vinci Code because that's an attack on the Catholic Church. That's designed to undermine the Catholic Church in the public consciousness. So like that's their approach. But then they also like in a meeting of people who are Catholics would be like, we got to make a lot of changes. This is a problem in the organization.
I'm just realizing that the three of us represent three different flavors of Catholic because my mom's family is Italian American, and so she grew up Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to like CCD, like the after school thing for a little bit when I was a kid. So I've definitely gotten enough ample exposure to the Catholic Church. So yeah, I can't. First of all, everything you're saying is making me more excited to see this movie.
Yeah. You should.
I was already pretty excited, but you're checking like every box, like, and now that I realize that we have kind of like, varying degrees of Catholic backgrounds, to kind of reference, I'm even more excited for us to talk about it eventually when we review it. That's awesome.
I mean, technically, I think it's all Roman Catholic because that's the church,
right? Because it's the Vatican. I know, but still.
But yes, different like commitment levels in the family, different approaches to Catholicism as a faith, as a lifestyle, as a ethnicity, almost, or whatever, something approaching that. Yeah, I think that'll be interesting, and I think that having that, you don't need it, I don't think, but also like Andrew and I both had it. I think that having like CCD, knowing like just generally sort of the structure of the church in a way that like a regular person may not know is only going to increase the enjoyment of like watching the process, seeing it played out, the locations and everything around.
Love it.
In and around the Vatican.
So to try to segue us into Oscars watch, I have a question about Isabella Rossellini. Oh. So Katie Rich, formerly of Little Gold podcast, Little Gold Men from Vanity Fair. If you are a listener of Little Gold Men and you're like, where did Katie Rich go? Wasn't she the host of that show? She is now at The Ankler, and has her own new podcast called The Prestige Junkie. I would highly recommend it. I've enjoyed it's pretty new. Like there aren't that many episodes that she's done, but I've loved every single one. She has great guests to talk about award season and stuff like that. And so she was at the Montclair Film Festival, which is like
New Jersey?
I think New Jersey.
Yeah.
The tri-state area for sure. I think New Jersey. And two things. One is that she interviewed Stephen Colbert, whose wife apparently is like on the board of this film festival. Like they like co-founded it or something. And so when she mentioned Conclave, was like, I can't believe I just interviewed Stanley Tucci and I hadn't seen this movie. Like all I want to do is talk to him about Conclave, which I thought was hilarious. But the main point that I wanted to get at was, she said that in the screening there and at her screening, I think in Toronto, wherever this premiered, maybe
I think what you're saying, the answer is going to be it happened at our screening too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Where like, so Isabella Rossellini apparently got like a mid-movie applause.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
That's amazing.
I mean, I would not be surprised if it happened in regular movie theaters.
That's awesome. So my Oscars watch segue is like, does that mean she's going to do a Judi Dench style, I'm only in this movie for 2 seconds, but I'm still going to get a supporting actress nomination?
It's going to be I forget, is it Beatrice Straight? It's the woman from Network. It would have to be that woman because it's even smaller than Judi Dench.
Oh, okay.
And I think Beatrice Straight, if that is her name, and I apologize for not knowing off the top of my head.
That's right.
Thank you, Antonio. That, and thank you, Jen. I saw you were going to look it up. That like is only like 4 or 5 minutes, but just like, I think it's in like, she's in fewer scenes, but has one sort of like big scene. Isabella Rossellini is like around in the movie a lot and is given great face. Is just sort of like looking and like reacting to things. And then has one very short moment where she like steps forward to say something and just crushes it. To put it in unnecessary sports terms that I think very few people will care about, he was Xavier Tillman during the last year's NBA Finals, who was a bench player on the Celtics who just was sort of like hanging around and then came in for one game because someone was hurt, got a bunch of rebounds, and the one time the ball was passed to him, hit a 3-pointer that like sealed the game. And that's exactly what it was like. Was just sort of like, just kind of there, just kind of like serving a role. And then when it's like, it's your turn, this is your time. just destroyed it.
Oh, I love it. I love that for her. Okay. I can't believe I haven't seen this movie yet.
So I think it could happen, but it would definitely be like the people who either don't like this movie or haven't seen it will be like looking at the screen time numbers and being big mad, especially if she gets in over someone who is in a category fraud situation and is like clearly a prominent part of a movie. But I would contend Isabella Rossellini is an important part that the movie does not work without her being there. So I could see the case being made. And it's also Isabella Rossellini, who I believe we looked afterwards has never been nominated.
I believe it's correct.
That's crazy.
The time is now. So let's get into a broader Oscars watch. So I want to kind of do a general kind of where are we in the Oscars race kind of check, because we're kind of talking about multiple movies in this one episode. But then also like we can sort of talk about like out of the 4 films that we're talking about today, the 3 that we saw at Newport Beach and the one that you saw at the early screening at USC, like which of those is the strongest in the Oscar race now?
Conclave, for sure.
Okay.
Sorry, Jen. It's Conclave.
It's all right. I put it in my Vulture draft, so
yeah. As the only long take review member who didn't include it in the draft, that's one of the first things I said to Antonio was like, I made a mistake.
You made a mistake.
Yeah, I needed to include this. And now Dune 2 isn't going to get a score nomination? Come on. Losing points left and right here.
Oh, because you did draft Dune 2.
I did draft Dune 2, which I still feel great about. I feel great
Dune
about
2 was too rich for my blood, so as much as I wanted to put it in there, I couldn't. Yeah. So Conclave, are we talking like only screenplay and maybe Ralph Fiennes? Or are we talking a big Best Picture nominee kind of run? Like what would you?
I think Best Picture is possible. I think that their supporting actor and potentially Isabella Rossellini is also a potential nominee as well. So,
and I don't think director's out of contention either.
Yeah,
like that, because there's a lot of really like fun shots that are kind of sneak up on you, and then suddenly just like an establishing thing that's like this really gorgeous shot, but it also just like maintains this momentum the whole time through. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I would be shocked if it didn't get actor and adapted screenplay as a nomination. And then I would think, the order floor Antonio had was right. I think that's the floor. I would, unless there's some like, huge issue that comes up or some other movies just suddenly start stampeding, I think there has to be room in the 10 for it. And especially assuming that those two are getting some momentum. But then it could be, it could be supporting, Tucci for supporting actor, although there's plenty of good supporting actors. Stanley Tucci is sort of like the most prominent, and he has some of the more like obviously delicious moments that you can be like, yes, like this is and also like, I don't know if he's well liked, but like he's well liked by audience members. And so it's like, I think he's prominent there, potentially actress, supporting actress, and potentially director. And then like, I mean, art direction, costumes, like all the things that are like, it's all the puffery of the Roman Catholic Church. Like why wouldn't all those things also potentially get nominated? So yeah, it could steamroll and suddenly be at like 7, 8, or, that level of nominations.
Wow. All right. And then who's kind of the next strongest contender after that? Is it, I kind of want to say it might be Blitz, even though both of you were a little cooler on it and many other critics were also kind of cooler on it. It could be that basic Academy voter, everyone's rolling their eyes at the Academy choosing it kind of nominee.
The question is whether or not Blitz is the sort of the basic choice in a way. To go back to Berger, is it the All Quiet on the Western Front of this year, where it's just sort of like, yep, classic movie kind of thing. Like, let's do this, let's roll it in. Or is the backlash, like the expectations were so high for it, is the backlash going to be like this disappointed? And like, these movies kind of come out and then they go on Apple and they kind of go away. Like, I know we all have the memory of Coda suddenly like storming forward, but like, this feels more like the Tom Hanks one where he was on the destroyer, which was a very nice war movie. But like, exactly, like both of you are like, what? Like there was an Apple movie written by Tom Hanks and starring Tom Hanks where he was the commander of a destroyer in the Pacific, and it's a great little war movie that no one ever thinks about except for my parents, who love that movie because they love destroyers and World War II. But yeah, so I think I think that like if we're betting, I would bet on Blitz, but I would also not be surprised if like suddenly Hard Truths surpassed it, because Blitz only gets like maybe one or two little things and Hard Truths gets up to 3 or 4.
It feels to me like it could be sort of like a Nightmare Alley thing where like everyone dismisses it and then it suddenly pops up and we're like, huh, that ended up in here.
That was a mistake. We shouldn't have included that.
And then
I also think it's possible that the piano lesson gets acting nominations. I mean, Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom had prominent acting nominations, and again, I don't think that this movie is as strong as those movies, but there are big name actors doing big acting in it. So I think it's possible.
I think at this point we can somewhat name names, which is like Danielle Deadwyler is in the odds making in like second or third place in terms of likelihood of nominations for supporting actress. Which
she's number 2 on Gold Derby.
Yeah, which I mean, I when we were talking earlier about like people who come in strong and really cranked up, she was one of them. And I think that may end up being a divisive performance. But there's also this feeling that like she's kind of owed an Academy nomination because people thought she should have been nominated for Till and she wasn't. So yeah, there also was this lingering, and if you go back far enough into our Oscar coverage here in the Long Take Review, I think this has been discussed. There was an assumption for a while when this movie was announced that like Samuel L. Jackson was in the pole position for supporting actor because he was prominent. He did this role on Broadway in the play, was nominated for a Tony, didn't win, but it was like, but he's doing it in the movie. He has only gotten 1 nomination, and he's this like actor, and everyone who works with him seems to love him. Like it's his time. And he like his, I think in a way to the benefit of the movie and maybe even like to his credit, like he seems to be the most marginalized in the switch over from the adaptation from the play to the movie, because his big scene is this big monologue that you can tell would be riveting, just him saying it, but that's where they cut in all the flashbacks. So suddenly he's just a narrator for like 5 minutes, and then he kind of goes back to just being like a very fun supporting Sam Jackson performance off to the side, and you don't get that big emotional moment. So yeah, if it is acting, I think it would in supporting actor, it would be Ray Fisher, who plays sort of like the friend character.
He's ranked really low on Gold Derby. He's number 35, which I think is unjust. He's very good in that movie. In a true supporting way. You know what I mean? Like the people who are ahead of him are kind of absurd.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do respect to Chris Hemsworth in Furiosa, but I don't think that he's has a better chance than Ray Fisher in The Piano Lesson. But yeah, I mean, at that point, once you get to like the 100-to-1 odds, which I think starts at number 13, it's all the same. It's all just like the order in which they've put him on the board. But yeah, I don't think it's. Yeah, I actually think The Piano Lesson is going to fade. I think that's probably not. I think that's not going to be super impressive. I don't know if again, it didn't bother me in terms of the feeling of watching the movie that it still had that staginess, but I think that's going to hurt the adapted screenplay argument, because it's like, you didn't really adapt it. It's still just kind of the play. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, Antonio, but I would lean towards thinking like, I think it's going to be a little of a whatever.
What do we think about Hard Truths? Like, I know we talked about Marianne Jean-Baptiste is very deserving, but like because of the competition might not be able to make it in. But does that movie in general do anything else? Screenplay?
I think screenplay. I think that there's a if people see Hard Truths and if they like Marianne Jean-Baptiste enough and that movie enough, I think you have to at least consider Michelle Austin for supporting actress. She plays her sister, and she's really essential because Marianne Jean-Baptiste's character is so harsh, that there's a warmth about the sister that really balances the movie and helps to sort of like leaven the sort of like acidity
Right.
from Pansy. Yeah,
But also makes it more tragic because I found that when
sure.
you watch them being so joyful and light and like really enjoying life, that makes, in contrast, Pansy's inability to enjoy anything so much worse and so much sadder. In a way that's very powerful, I think.
Definitely.
So beyond the 4 movies that we've been talking about, how are we doing in terms of award season? We're coming off of the big fall film festival run. Now it's the smaller festivals, regional critics groups will start chiming in. We're kind of working our way towards people actually seeing these movies in the next couple of months. So at this point, like, who would you consider our big front runners? Who's in the best picture 10 at this point? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Gold Derby for Best Picture, and as just sort of referenced, like it's all odds making. It's very far away, but you get like there's a top 15 that's closer than 100 to 1. Everything 16 and above is over that, and so right now they have outside the top 10 in so from 15 to 11, The Room Next Door, Wicked, which feels ambitious, The Piano Lesson, A Complete Unknown, and September 5th, which, like, okay, and again, those are Piano Lesson we just saw, but the other ones sort of have not. The Room Next Door got some festival things. Other ones are not really out there yet. And then the 10 that they have, again, this is the Gold Derby odds, are in ascending order of probability: A Real Pain, Nickel Boys, Gladiator 2, Blitz, Sing Sing, Dune Part 2, Conclave, The Brutalist, Emilia Perez, and Honora. And I would say if we were, which I don't think we'll have time for because there's so many movies coming out, but if we were doing the sort of fall like prediction check-in, last year we had Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Poor Things that we sort of were like, pack them into every category. Like whatever we've got, like if there's an option, put it in. That's Honora, Emilia Perez, and The Brutalist this year. Those are the 3 like clear front runners. And, that doesn't mean that one of them is going to be the winner. I think it just means they're the buzziest right now. Antonio, what do you think?
I agree with that. I mean, like, this is such a weird year in that we don't have like a steamrollery kind of movie. It feels like anything can happen. I mean, I feel like Honora has been sort of penciled in at the top for a while, but it hasn't. But I mean, we haven't seen it
Hasn't
yet.
lost any steam.
Yeah.
It hasn't lost any steam. Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to watch that. I'm hoping. I have my intuition is it'll be my favorite movie, but like, what do I know, right? Like, there are plenty of things that I thought I was going to love and didn't, and plenty of things that I wasn't that excited about that I really enjoyed. But right now, yeah, I think PT is absolutely right. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I think the big question mark for me, even though early reactions to Gladiator 2 have been very, very positive, I think one critic characterized them as euphoric. I think we have to be careful about that because in a lot of ways those early reactions are designed to be the most positive, right, to help the film. And I do think that ultimately there's only going to be room for one big blockbuster sequel. And I think Dune Part 2 just already has such a strong case that Gladiator 2 is going to have to be pretty darn amazing for it to knock that out. I do hear tons of buzz for Denzel Washington in supporting actor, but I think that doesn't necessarily mean it's getting everything and getting it in Best Picture. And because a lot of people just have a slot for it in Best Picture just as default, having not seen the movie. And I'm like, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
To me, that feels more like uncertainty around those movies between like 8 and 15, where it's just sort of like, and like, again, like now we've seen The Piano Lesson, like it could totally be nominated, but like, it's not like, wow. And Jen, you and I saw A Real Pain back at Sundance. And, we really liked it, but I didn't like peg that as like, it's got to be in the best. It's got to be in there. So it feels like, that could get in. And I think, that could suddenly kind of sneak around with like 5 or 6 nominations, maybe, and might win between supporting actor and original screenplay, but doesn't feel like I gotta be there. But like, what if a complete unknown blows people away? Or people, suddenly catch on to September 5th and are like, this is it. That it suddenly could feel like Gladiator 2 is going to be on the outside. But maybe it's like Avatar The Way of Water that had like was there with Top Gun Maverick, but Top Gun Maverick got all the chatter, but Avatar was like, I'm here too. Like, I also got a Best Picture, and I got my one below the line thing that everyone knew I was going to win. I won it, and that was fine.
But I think if Conclave is more of a crowd pleaser and less of a serious movie with a capital M, like, I think that also takes one of the spots. You know what I mean? Like, there's only so much room for the more kind of like populist picks.
Yes. Now, the thing with Conclave, and I didn't say it earlier, but the biggest speed bump that I foresee, Victoria and I were talking about this after the screening, is like, there will be a backlash, and there will be a coordinated backlash from people that are like, they're disrespecting the Catholic Church more generally, they're disrespecting religion, and they're disrespecting Jesus, and they don't like you, and Hollywood's evil. And that sort of like, there's going to be a lot of drumbeat around that. I don't know if that's going to stop it from being successful. It might actually make it more successful, because people will be like, what? They're doing what now? And I want to go see that. But I do wonder if it's going to make it exhausting to think about Conclave and to talk about Conclave. And especially like a movie that's about like, how do we go about selecting the leader of something, and what's the best frame of mind to be in, and what's the process, and how is the process messed up, and how does it potentially lead to like the worst kind of person taking over? The way this movie will feel is going to be very much dependent upon stuff that happens outside of a movie theater in the next few weeks. So it's possible that we get to the Academy season and everyone's like, I have no desire to think about that damn movie. And then Conclave gets to like fall away, and it's just like, what about that movie that's about like people with like, there's like a rhino and a shark in an arena, and it's people in like with swords? Like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I want to talk about that.
No, that's fair. And I have heard multiple critics / pundits say that is going to be the biggest campaign influencer, is the outcome of the election, and kind of like how the mood after it, right? Like, of how people are feeling, if they're feeling kind of weird, like, are they going to want escapist, or are they going to want something that confronts the political moment? And like, so I think bad news for The Apprentice either way. To be honest,
everyone who has seen it says those two actors are incredible.
No,
but I cannot imagine. I mean, it's made no money almost in the theater, so I assume that's probably not going very far.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that a lot of people are saying that, if you think about this time last year, we didn't realize it, but we had already seen most of the Best Picture nominees. So that's interesting to think about, because I think a lot of people are like, well, let's wait and see for these 5 movies, but maybe it won't matter. Maybe.
Sure. Maybe Clint Eastwood's just coming with juror number 2, playing on like 3 screens around America, and then suddenly getting like 4 or 5 nominations. Maybe.
And I think Sing Sing is poised for a comeback. I think if it doesn't campaign hard at the right time, forget it. Yeah. But I do think that's possible. I think people are fantasizing about The Substance. Granted, I'm squeamish and I haven't seen it. Greg told me not to see it, but even still, I want to see it because it sounds cool. Like, it sounds, and people were like, yeah, pencil Demi Moore in for Best Actress. I don't know. I think people are even saying now Margot Qualley needs to be in there too. I was like, let's slow down. When was the last time a horror movie got that many nominations? Like, that were above the line.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in general, the mood is like, anything's possible. This is a pretty relatively open race compared to past years when we had, like, especially last year. Last year, it was like the slow march of Oppenheimer, where people like, is it really Oppenheimer? Is it really Oppenheimer? That must be something else. Nope, it's Oppenheimer, right? Everywhere all at once, low key, like in a different way, kind of did that as well. So yeah, good. it's been good for movies that came out earlier recently
Yes.
for whatever reason. So Dune Part 2?
I mean, I believe I planted a flag on it when I said,
You
like, when
did.
you asked like what the predictions are, is like, it does feel possible if there's a lot of, you asked, I think, this was over text, so this is not great for the listeners, but like, I think you asked over text, like, is Conclave the kind of movie that could come in like second to fourth for like enough of the preferential ballots that it ends up, getting over the line first? And I don't think so, only because I do think there's people who will put it 10th because they're like, I'm mad about
Right.
it. It's blasphemous. I think that Dune Part 2 could be that movie. Like, that's the one people could be like, oh, that movie was great. Like, oh, I like this one better. But like, this one is different for enough people that suddenly Dune Part 2 unites.
I think Sing Sing could be that too. I have a hard time picturing people saying bad things about Sing Sing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what would you, I don't know, what criticism would you have of that movie?
But maybe, maybe we see Honora and Emilia Perez and or the Brutalist, and we're just sort of like, oh, that's it.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, it's an exciting time. And like, honestly, I'm just excited that all these movies are going to be coming out soon.
Yeah.
We're actually going to get to see them. It's going to keep us really busy, but in a good, exciting way. Thank you very much to the Newport Beach Film Festival for showing us such a good time. We had a lovely time. Based on my Instagram feed, we missed out on all the celebrity action because it was happening at those parties that PT was talking about. Or
June Squibb.
Like panels. Yeah. The Aubrey Plaza was there.
Nick Cage.
Carol Burnett. Yeah. I was like, where were all these people at our screenings? Like, so it's interesting to think about that. Like the movies themselves were kind of left to their own devices, with the exception of Hard Truth with Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who was lovely. And it was such a treat to be able to see her in person. But yeah, I don't know. Great.
And the Newport Beach Film Festival is welcome to give us press passes for next year so we can watch more of the movies and cover more of the events. I was going to keep it classy and stop just short of saying that, but I'm glad you did. Yeah. I'm just noting it.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, it was a great time.
So, Antonio, where are you?
Yes.
People can find me on Letterboxd at Elefano, AELEFANO. PT, where can people find you?
They can find me on Letterboxd as well at PT McNiff, PT MCNIFF. You can also find the show there at LTR Pod, or you can find us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review, or you can subscribe wherever you are listening. Give a subscription, leave a little rating, leave a review, tell your friends, spread the word. Always good to have more people listening into the show. Jen, where can they find you?
You can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen, and you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI.
Vacation, all I ever wanted. Getaway.
We didn't even talk about the promos.
Well, because I want them to give us a pass. I don't want to make fun of the Newport Beach film community or the.
Yes,
Newport
they were
Beach
very
town
fun.
as well.
Let's just say that we had a lot of fun watching.
They were very fun, and if you want notes, we have notes.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive new podcast episodes, as well as written reviews of films with Oscar buzz and new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.